Okay, so to create the spray, the first thing we need to do is start with our forget-me-nots, and we start to just complete the taping on all the items that we want to put into the spray. So here I'm just starting with, maybe I like the forget-me-nots in clusters. They grow in multiples. You wouldn't normally have just one on their own. Maybe you could if you wanted to have them as a single filler flower, but I think they look nice if you just position them in groups of 3. So if you also make it so that you've got one slightly higher than the other, so here I've got, maybe the next one is actually about halfway down the back stem of the first one, and this is about halfway down the back stem of the second one that you've put in. But I would suggest that we tape them all in together at the same distance, which we're not going to get too specific because a lot of it's got to be by eye, but the lowest flower here is going to be taped in at about 1.5 centimeters, because we want some stem. If you start to tape everything really tightly up at the neck of the flower, then it doesn't have any movement at all. And on these, I'm going to tape down probably about 2.5 inches. You don't have to go all the way down, just come into from there to there. So when you've got something that's put together, but you've decided you don't want it assembled as it has been, then you can, if you're careful, hold on really tightly and pull the flower away from the main stem, and then just use your nail to pull off the excess tape. It's a much quicker way than trying to find the end and unravel, but you must make sure that you hold tight onto the stem, not onto the sugar, so it doesn't break. And then so that's a quick way to dismantle it if something's gone into the wrong place. So in the garden, we've got 3 sprigs of forget-me-nots, 3 periwinkles, 3 buttercups, and then probably about 15 to 19 ruscus leaves as well. So I've kind of got all my pieces that I think I want to go into my spray. And the first thing I need to do, if you look at the garland here, I've got some small leaves. When I'm creating, even if it's, so this is kind of it's still coming wider at the top here, but as a garland, it could be the same width all the way around. But I always start with something small to begin with, rather than me putting a daffodil right at the end here, which really wouldn't look right. See, that would probably look good there, or maybe halfway. So I'm going to have a look at my leaves, and I'm going to choose some. You may all find that yours are all the same size, but I'm going to choose 3 that are fairly small. Okay, so there's 3 there. And then take a little strip of tape. Another tip, oops, don't work with long strips of tape. It takes far too long to unravel it, and make sure you fully stretch it before you start. So just pick your first leaf, whichever one that's going to be, and we're going to leave a gap of about 1 centimeter on there. And then I'm just going to bend my next leaf sideways so that I can enable that to sit comfortably beside on the main, this will be the main stem. Okay, and then if we just take 1 twist of tape, you can, if you've pre-taped all your wires, and the reason I do that is because then we can leave a bit of wire showing if the piece of the flower or the foliage is growing like that, and you're not going to notice it because you've got the same color green on there. It just makes it look much more natural. Give that maybe 1 or 2 twists, and then we can bring in our next leaf, which again, I'm just going to use my nail to bend the wire against. So we've got a little bit of a bend in there, and that can be added in on the other side, slightly lower down. Okay, so we give that 2 or 3 twists now. We can always unravel this tape if we need to add something else in. And then everything we do now is going to be built on this, and this is becoming your main stem. So the next bit to go on there will be your forget-me-nots. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute. We'll just get these done first. So next for our garland, we want to put on our little forget-me-not bundle of 3. And I'm just going to rest this onto the top here. I can bend it a little bit so it's not sitting flat onto the leaves. It gives you a little bit of kind of height as you're building the arrangement or spray. Now, when I'm putting things together, I like them to be quite close together, but not so they're all on top. We're trying to create a bit of length with the leaves, so this needs to come down a bit more. But if it comes down too far, it's going to become very elongated and very stemmy. So I like to try and get it so that the first flower is maybe just a third onto the top leaf here, and we're going to allow it to have a little bit of stem. So I think probably where I've finished off my taping there, I can just simply add this in. The other option is, because you've taped until there on your flower, so they're all taped in here, you can just unravel your tape a little bit. So just unwind it a couple of turns, and then your taping will coincide with where you started your taping on the forget-me-not. So it's just trying to keep the taping as neat as possible. When you've rested that on, you're ready to start turning the tape round. Each time you twist, just give it a good press so it's all on. And sometimes with the bigger flowers, you might want to get just your nail into the areas in between the stems so that it presses in and makes it look more natural. So again, I'm just going to give it 2 twists. I might unravel depending on where the next thing goes, and just watch out for your tape not to twist. I'd still be on the half width at this stage. Okay. So the ivy is a bit of an extra. So if you've got the ivy, we can maybe pop 1 little sprig of 3 small leaves in, and they are going to, this is just going to lay on top, but slightly nestled. So again, we don't want really loads and loads of length. So you could just decide on how, that looks a bit crowded. So I think probably here, and then we can adjust the leaf. All right, but otherwise just keep it as it is, and we'll be ready to add some more of your Ruscus in a moment. So we're just going to tape that on a couple of twists. I don't want to go mad with my taping because you're going to be adding more things. So it makes absolutely no sense to keep running the tape right down to the bottom. But here you can see I've got a brown join and a green join, which is where my nail comes in, and it's quite good to give it a little bit of a rub just to blend. And then I want to add in another leaf. So I'm going to start with, you can go whatever size you want now, but I'm going to start with a small one coming in on my left side here, slightly further down. We could have that. So the forget-me-nots were taped in about here, and we're now going to bring the leaf in slightly lower. So we're starting to elongate the arrangement. Now, if your tape is in the wrong place, you can always tear it off and bring it back up. Okay, or unravel, whichever's easiest, but just try and keep it neat. So a buttercup, if you've got a small one, because we're right at the end of the spray, we can put the smallest buttercups in first if you have different sizes. And these I want to bend about 1 centimetre from the calyx, so that they've got, again, a little bit of height to them. Okay, so the idea, this is a bit low, I want to bend that a little bit more. When you're creating whatever you're creating, the way I like to work is you're looking at making a triangle. So it could be a really elongated pointed triangle, and you're coming out wider, wider, wider. Okay, so kind of this sort of shape. You also need to look at it from the side. So you might have the flattest part here, but as you start to add your flowers, you want them to climb in height. So you've got triangle this way as well. Okay, now I'm not a florist. I don't really know the real rules of arranging flowers. This is just what works for me, and everything I create is in a triangle. It might be a fat triangle, fat short squat triangle, or fat, just an elongated long. And the idea is, as you start to add in your main flowers, you're not going from dead flat to really tall. You're actually graduating your height this way, so that it's not a shock that that daffodil is in there. Okay, because you don't want everything to suddenly be flat and then put in this really tall flower, which will just overpower it all. So when you're adding each flower or piece of foliage, just bear that in mind. Foliage is more for backing, but it's the flowers especially. So having that in mind, I'm actually going to bend this about 2 centimeters in height and pop that in. Okay, and if I turn that on the side, you can see that we're starting to achieve that slope that way as much as we are as a triangle this way. And I can bring my tape in. The beauty of having the stem a little bit longer is we can actually make that look lower just by pulling it into place. We don't need to have everything right in the center. And then I'm going to add in a slightly bigger leaf, like we did before, just bending it a fraction. The bigger the leaf, maybe the longer the stem is, or the gap of the stem is to the main stem. So I'm only really bending this just a little bit. And that is going to go in on the other side. Just keeping, so if I put this right up here, you can see it's disturbing my triangle. But if I bring it down just a fraction, I've still got this kind of neat line in my eye. Taping on nice and tight, pressed, running your finger through the gaps of each wire just to make it look more natural. That one's gone quite in, quite tight. So we can add an optional primrose in next. It's already got a tall stem on it. So if we pop that, just place it on top and just position to have a look to see how you like it in the arrangement or spray. Keeping an eye on this height to make sure that it is gradually growing. We've got more to put in, so I'm not too worried. The other thing to watch out for is when you're adding extra stems of foliage flower on this main stem, try and get it so that this stem always stays rounded. So if that means you're placing this at the side to keep this rounded, or if it's getting a bit kind of oval shaped, so wide and flat, then it goes on top. Often what you find is when you're adding the flowers, there's just a natural slot for it to sit on the main stem, but just try not to get it too wide and too chunky. So I'm running out of tape, so I may as well just tape that in. And at the moment, my main stem is okay because I've got that much of thick wire and then a thin wire in here, which is the one that belonged to the ivy. So if you haven't got the ivy in, you're probably all thin. But as the spray grows, the wires that you've been using, which are the 28 gauge, may not necessarily be strong enough to hold the spray together and stop it from flopping. So it's a good idea to have on standby some 26 gauge wires, or maybe some 24 gauge wires, and maybe 3. So 24 would definitely be stronger. I don't normally use a thicker wire than a 24. The reason for that is because you could put a 20 gauge in there if you wanted to, which is really thick. But the problem you've got then is you've got no flexibility on how you bend the wire. It's just 90 degrees and that's all you can do with it. So I'd much rather put a number of thinner wires in and have my strength, so that I've got the flexibility to curve and shape and adjust. And these I'm going to put in, I'm just going to place them a little bit staggered. So there's one slightly lower than the other. So this is 326, but 24 will probably work better for extra strength. We can always add more wires in. Now the idea here is to stagger them not only in height here so they don't form a step, but also just wrap them around the arrangement at the stem of the arrangement or spray, and then we'll get those taped. Don't tape all the way down, there's no point. The more times you tape down, the fatter that stem is going to be. So just maybe 2, 3, 4 times to stop them from sliding out. And now we've got something that's got a bit more strength to it. Show you. So we definitely need to keep up with our foliage, but the next flower maybe is the periwinkle, because I haven't put one of those in yet. So I'm just going to add in one piece of green, and let's just change the angle so you can see me a bit more clearly. So again, bending. I always bend my leaves, always bend my flowers. It's just so that they're not crashing into each other. You've got a bit more of an idea of where they're going. Just going to unravel this a couple of times, taking care not to lose the extended wires that we've just put in. And this one, I'm going to place the stem on top, keep it nice and rounded. And again, you can see here we've got this kind of rough triangle. So we can add a leaf, a couple of twists, and almost immediately bring a little periwinkle in on the other side. So what's quite nice here is you've got blue at diagonal, and you've got your 2 different yellow shades at diagonal as well. We could have put that in there. It's a choice. So here I'm going to bend, that's the base of the flower here, but I'm going to bend that about 1.5 centimeters because I want some length to this, and actually probably curve it up a little bit rather than a sharp angled bend. And we can gently place that. Watch your petals when you're putting together so they don't crash into each other. And then where we've made that bend, which is probably about 2 centimeters actually, we can give it 2 or 3 twists. And we go, I want to vary these leaves. Be gentle with how you're adjusting as well, because if you're a bit too brutal, you might find something will snap off. But I just want to twist those leaves. Okay, so now we've got our definitely starting to look garlandy. Okay, so adding in a leaf and adding in a periwinkle. And you can see from here, if I were to draw a straight line, we've got a definite triangle angle here, and the same. Now with the garlands, that's quite elongated and narrow, so you don't have to make this any wider. We can just go with this now as we continue to add. And the formula, as you're adding your pieces in, you've got your pattern now, and this is what you're going to repeat. So the next step is going to be ivy, foliage, forget-me-nots, and so on. And you just match that formula as you go. So if you're adding in some ivy at this point and you feel that you've made them up to with too many leaves on, then we can split this and keep the one we've torn off. We can use that for later. It's quite handy because these ivies have got extended bits in them as well. But again, you don't need to put the ivy in. You could just work with your Ruscus. If you are doing ivy, we've got one that's coming kind of on this side. That had my 3 small ones, and now I want to add this. I feel like it wants to go in here. It could go in there, but I feel this then would be right in the center. And what I'm trying to do is make the foliage as a bit of a background. Okay, so I've just got 2 taped together, and we're just going to turn that, add a bit of an angle, and we just maybe sit that here. So it's going to add to the widening of the arrangement if that's something you're trying to achieve, but it's giving us interest and room for what we want to put in next. Okay, so we're going to couple of twists on there. As a rule of thumb, when you're taping, I normally pick the color tape that the majority of the arrangement has been made with. So for this, although the ivy's got dark brown, the rest of the arrangement was made in the light green. So I am using my light green. And I feel, looking at my eucalyptus, I don't think this is going to add anything to my arrangement. I think it's going to make it too fussy on the green. So I'm actually going to leave my eucalyptus out. Your pattern you've already formed for the garland. So you would just follow your pattern, your formula, until you get to this point here, which is different. Okay, just this bit is different, but everything else is as I've just shown you. Just keep adding the leaves and the flowers in the order you would like to make it as long as you like. If you're wanting to make more of a spray, kind of a piece to go on top of a cake, then you've probably got enough for one side. And what you need to do is repeat this for the second side. Okay. And this is where later on I'll be able to show you how we get the stems to run vertically so that it can go into a pick of a cake. And this one will be running horizontally so that it can be laid on a cake. I have got enough foliage to maybe add in just one more leaf on this side. I feel like I want to bring that in, bend it slightly. You could tear your tape off. Leaving a little bit of stem showing at the bottom of the leaf. Just take that in. Now, if you know that that is you stopping because you're using a big flower, then at this point we would tape all the way down. If you're creating the garland, you continue. You don't tape anything all the way down until you get to the point where you've got this collection of leaves. Okay, so if you remember, you just carry your formula on and try and keep this fairly even width if you're going for the garland look. But if you're making something which has got the main flower in it, you're going to need a little bit of width to it. So what we're going to do is leave this one to one side and just use it as a guide. And I'm going to go again with my taping. So the first thing I've got to do is split my ivy leaves because they are too long. Okay, then you're not wasting anything because you can use them for something else. So I just need a small piece, and that's given me a spare bit of wire which has come out there as well. So that is my ivy started. Then we can bring in our mini leaves. Okay, because it's all very well and good making it longer, but somehow you've got to finish it off. So if you're having something with a main flower in the center, it's much better to divide what you're making into, it doesn't have to be equal sized piles. Often the section that goes on the other side would be a bit smaller. But if you split your arrangement to start with, split all the things that you've made to start with, then you know you've got enough. And you can also make even larger, more kind of pedestal type arrangements, you know, like you get in the church by the altar. I mean, I'm not talking that size, but that shape is made from creating 3 of these pieces. And then you get a proper wide triangular shape arrangement or spray. And so you would then divide your piles of flowers and foliage into 3. And the other thing to note really here is if you're making arrangements or sprays to go onto different tiers of cake, and you've got 3 tiers or 4 tiers of cake, then you need to divide your pieces, everything you've made, into those 3 sprays. And they could all be the same size. I mean, nowadays it doesn't really matter but you know, if you've got a small tier, you might want to put a small arrangement on, a medium tier, large, and the largest number of flowers will go on the bottom tier. So you need to divide or put into piles your foliage and your flowers for those 3 tiers. Otherwise, you're going to put everything together and then realize that you've run out of something, and you're back to the point where you've got to make again. And it is surprising, because when you make, when you look at all of this in a piece of oasis and you think, cool, it doesn't look like much at all. And then when you start to put it together, it's really quite surprising how big your arrangement or spray can end up. Even with just a few flowers, you can create some really nice pieces. So here I'm adding in my Buttercup, and so I'm just following this so far. I've got Primrose to go in. This one's going to be bent quite tight because it's already quite long. Just remembering that each flower that I add in needs to have to be a little bit taller than the next. So start tight, and then you can become, you know, give them more stem length as you go. Then we can add in another leaf. And this is where my first ivy can come in. So this time I'm going to put that on this side. The other thing you've got to bear in mind, but I don't want to get too complicated with this, is that your arrangement, when you're finished, this is actually going to be turned the other way. So when you're putting this together, it's quite good to copy verbatim here, because when you twist it, it then becomes a mirror image, so it's opposite. So that way your Primrose will be on the opposite side, as will your Periwinkle, and so on. Otherwise, if you don't match this and the blue's on this side, then when you turn it, you'll have blue and blue, if that makes sense. It doesn't matter if that's what you're after, but just bear that in mind. Copy it. That's giving me a bit of length, and it's all right if you can see things that are hiding behind as well. Because I always think, you know, it's great to be able to see everything, but it's even nicer if you kind of discover things as you start to look at the arrangement or spray. Okay. Now, I want to put a Periwinkle in here. So I need a bit of room. But I probably want another little leaf in there as well. These leaves can be in the middle as well. They don't have to be all on the side. And this is something that you can adjust as you go, or once you're done. You can tweak. I always tweak. But here I want my periwinkle to go in there, so I need some space for it. Again, just bend that. I'll make a bit of a curve just using my thumb. Can add that one in here. A little bit higher. So you've got this nice angle going down. And just make sure that things are nicely taped in so they're not kind of twisting and sagging. And I've got to add in another slightly larger ivy. So here I've got my pieces that I broke off. I could use dark brown tape for this. Just pick two I like. But I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to use the Nile green just to save some time. And that wire that came out, I could probably use that to tape onto, so I've got some length, and that'll give me some strength to the spray as well. Pinching quite tight with the tape. It's fiddly to get the tape behind the leaf. And then, if you remember a suggestion, bend it a little bit so it comes out. That way it's not crashing in as you try and attach it to the spray. I just have a think about where you want it. So if it's the same on that one, when we turn it round, it's going to be on the opposite side, which balances it out a little bit. And we'll keep that stem for the ivy leaf on top of the main stem, so it stays rounded down here. Take that. So we're possibly, I'm looking at this now and I'm feeling like I need just one more piece of green here. So I'm just going to take one of my Ruscus leaves, add that in, which means my tape is too far down for the moment, so we'll just unravel, keep it nice and thin. It's very important to keep your taping as neat as possible, because when someone's looking at this, the whole thing, they want to see that the taping is a piece of art in itself. I mean, you should be able to look at the back and have pleasure in thinking that's nice and neat and tidy. And when you've finished adding everything in, you can tape down. So you've got so far with your little garland, and if you then want to, you've got to finish it off. So it's quite, I mean, it's all right to have some stem on there, but we can't just stop with a flower. We need something maybe either going to be very similar or along these lines to finish it off on the other side. So you could go small, or you could have something that's a little bit larger. I'm going to have something that's a bit larger. So I've just got 5 leaves left, and I'm going to start with the smallest one, and I'm going to assemble the start of the garland using these leaves. So smallest one first, and then if you just work your way up in size, that will probably be fine. So we've got about 1.5 centimeters gap on the first leaf. And then if we come down the stem, a couple of twists, bring in another leaf. Now these are going in quite tight because they are big. Come down the stem a little bit more, add in odd numbers are very good as well. I would say odd numbers are better than even. And then the last one probably going to be at the same level as this leaf here. And I'm taping it all the way down. This one feels like it's on the wrong side. We've got something that looks a little bit like this. Okay. Now, we want to have it so that this is actually going to come in here and hide some of our stem or all of our stem. So if we were to add it in this way, we're getting more and more and more stem. You're always going to have stem showing. But we can't assemble, we can't attach this up the back of this stem easily. So what we do is once you've made your piece, because I know I want these leaves in quite tight with the flower, I'm going to bend this wire back on itself. Now, it's probably a good idea at this stage to take a pair of tweezers, maybe clamp right where the last two leaves have been put in, and then bend your stem back at a 90-degree angle. Now you might have to bend it back further, but it just gives you the idea of what you're trying to achieve here. You've now got something that where the stems are possibly going to be the same direction. I feel like I want to go back a little bit more initially so that it's not crashing into my flower. So that's the angle I've got it at now. If you take a little bit of tape just in readiness, give that a stretch already. And then if we put position, so the wire now on the stem on each one is facing the same way. This is going to be positioned quite close to the base where we tied in our little periwinkle. One main stem over the top of the other, and this is where, because the spray is becoming quite large, it's a little bit hard to do this. You just need to be careful when you're spinning you don't catch something, and also maybe it's a good idea then to convert onto your full width tape. So if you find that this thin tape is becoming difficult to manage, this is one of those arrangements or sprays that it's, as you turn it, it's likely to whack you in the face. So just be mindful of what's around you, cups and anything else that might smash it. We'll come all the way to the end, and then the tail of tape, I'm just going to fold it up so that I can't see cut wire. And you could cut it off at this stage, but you just want it to be quite neat. Come back to the bottom here and give your fingernail a little rub in between those stems. So we've now got a tail of wire or taped wire. If you get something smooth, plasticky, back of a paintbrush, one of your tools, and run that across the stem, it will help to hide the twist of the tape. Just makes it feel more natural. Okay, and now we've got this section here taped in. And that just makes, it just gives you an end to your arrangement. We don't have to have all of this. We could cut it off and just tape over the bottom. You could just have a tiny amount of stem showing. And then if you wanted to, you could have this foliage kind of a bit more down. And it's entirely up to you how you finish this off. So as a garland, it could go around. If it was longer, then you could get to the point where this stem meets the other end. And what I would recommend then is this part here, in places, I would just wrap a little bit of tape, maybe one and another area, just to hold it in place so it doesn't snap back open again. Or it can just be a garland that's placed around. If you imagine that's the cake, it could just be placed around the base of the cake or on the cake, around the cake stand. Now, once you're done on that, you just need to have a look very carefully, adjusting each part so that you can see the glory of the flower. So if you've got a forget-me-not that's hiding behind, it's probably a better idea to suggest that you use a pair of tweezers to carefully tweak, unless you feel really confident with the paste, because it can break. I'm always tempted to handle by hand, but it is definitely not a good idea. It's better to use the tweezers. So now we're just bringing each leaf, each flower into a place that it can be seen. So my other way of putting all these together is where we've created two separate copied, so they're the same. And we've got to decide which one you want your daffodil on. It doesn't really matter. It's more about where it sits, how comfortable it fits. And I'm thinking probably I've got a wider area on this one, so I'm going to start by putting it on there. Now my husk is possibly going to break. I need to bend this so we've got a bit more height. Looks like a pipe. Before you start, get your tape ready. It's really important that you're not fiddling. You've got to pick quite a few things up now. And then we're going to position the daffodil. Now the daffodil, I'm going to come quite far on, because otherwise I'm going to have a gap in there. I don't like that idea. I like something where, yes, you've got room for butterflies, but you've got you want to discover. So this flower is partially hidden behind there. And we also need to check, we need to make sure that when this is on, that we haven't got too steep a jump to the main flower. I'm just bringing that down just a little bit, so we've got this slope. Let's have a look. And yeah, I think that works there. So where these two join, I'm going to tape in. So this is a bit fiddly, this bit, because you've got to watch out that you don't catch the petals as you're turning, and you do need to tape this all the way down. And your thick tape, your full width, your 1 centimetre width tape will probably work better for this. Okay, so I've gone down to here. Get in there with your fingernails, neaten that all off. Use your tool to smooth down those wrapped round lines, just watching your petals on your daffodils. So easy to catch them. Okay, so I mean that's quite a nice little arrangement in itself, but you've got this huge amount of stem showing, which is something we don't want. Now, to get your next part on, we need to turn this 180 degrees. So you've got it where you've got two stems coming together or crossing together. So just to give myself a little bit of reassurance, I'm going to start to bring these in until I can see that they're starting to look how they should. So quite tight in, so I'm not leaving a big gap. And quite tight in. Okay. And when it's looking roughly how you want it to, if you have a look at the side, you can see where they're crossing, which is very, very tight. Now I would, so where the ivy's gone in here, that's a clue. That is where it's crossed. One can stay straight, but the other one needs to be bent, just how I've shown you with the garland. So for something like this, it's probably easier to hold on to the stem, the main stem, this part here, tightly, and then very carefully. You can do it bit by bit, but when you bend it back, you've just got to remember that you keep everything in its place, because it's really easy to bend it skew with and then things are out of kilter. So just double check that it is still looking right from the top, or pretty much correctly from the top. So we've bent that back quite far. I'm going to go a little bit more. Okay. And that now can come back to here. Probably need it a bit more. I'm just going to show you two ways. This is one way it's going to go flat, and then I'll show you where it goes vertical. So now, having bent that, if I'm careful, I've got a blue, the periwinkle's in the way. I really need to get that properly bent backwards. This now can slot in. And if you look at the top with a bit of adjusting, that's pretty much where I want it to be. And you can see I've placed that one on the side here to keep it rounded. It feels like it wants to sit there to tape in. And I would tape from where the two main stems are joining all the way down. And you could, if you wanted to, stop about here and trim this off. And that would give you something that will sit nice and flat on your cake. Okay. Now, if you want this to sit upright, so if I just change angle, just change camera. If you want this to sit upright, okay, it's still in the right position now, but this is going to crash into your cake. If you imagine that this is your cake, there's no way, if you try and put a pick in the middle of here, this is going to be in the way. So let me first tape this, and then I will show you how you adjust it, because it's just a matter of bending it in the right position. Okay, so we'll go back to our arrangement or spray. This is tricky, and again, the thick tape is useful for this. So we'll just go in, start it off. Make sure you're over a surface so that if it drops, it's not going to go on the floor. Give it a little press. That just helps it be a bit more hands-free. And we start to tape down. A bit more tape. You can see by having this length of tape, it's becoming unmanageable. So it's much easier to have it in shorter strips, because here you need to kind of place it. And as you're doing this, you want to press quite firm, and every now and again get your nail in there we can neaten this off or smooth off the wrap around once we've got this all together. Just keep going for a bit longer. Now, I would recommend that you don't cut the wire ends until you absolutely know where you want that cut to be. And that will probably be at the point you put it into the cake, into the pick in the cake. So we'll leave that bit untaped because I know we won't want it that long because you can't get a pick that long. And then we're going to just tidy up. It really does make a difference. It closes up the any gaps and just smooths the tape. Okay, so that's what we've got now, which is an arrangement. I'm going to show you kind of an S shape and a C shape in a moment as well, but that gives you a nice little arrangement to work with. If we want that to go into the top of a cake in a pick, then we need to tip back. So first of all, this is the top part of the spray. We need to bend it back. We need to bend this back. We need to bring this up. And you do this in stages until you've got enough clearance on that bottom part here. Okay, so the idea is that you need a bigger pick, probably a 1 centimeter pick for this. You would push the pick into the cake, and then from here to here would be the length of your main stem, and this would sit in. Okay, just trying to think what I can put it on for you. Once you've positioned it onto the cake, you might find areas where you can actually have it so that it's a bit more down, so it's cascading down the side of a cake. And you may decide that you want this more up, so you can just bring it back into place. But you moved it back to give yourself room to move this one without crushing any of your flowers. But that is how you get it vertical. And at this point now, I would want to have a look to see what sort of direction I want each side of this spray to be. And you can either keep it long like this, or you can create a C shape. So it's where we just simply bend round one part here, and then mostly it's the end foliage that will be turned or bent. So suddenly you've got yourself a C arrangement or an arc. Or if you prefer, you can have, see, keeping this bulk here the same, just move the end foliage round. And then you've got yourself an S arrangement. I quite like, for this, I quite like the crescent or the C shape. And then on there, because it closes it up a bit more, that looks quite nice, that shape there. More, I think that's more modern. And then, as before, using your tweezers, being very careful. Just start to adjust each leaf, each flower, until you're happy with its view. And this here would not be as long. I need to just assemble this again, but say we trimmed to here, this stem is a bit of a stabilizer, so it can be used to help hold your arrangement or spray in place. Sometimes if you zigzag it, so kind of like a subtle S shape on there, it creates the stand. I have to play with this because it never does what I want, but it might just help you lift the spray so you've got something that's a bit more upright. Just move that out of the way so you can see what. Can you see that's a bit more upright at the end? Quite pretty. So there you have the garland, or more of a spray which would go onto a cake. So the last thing I wanted to show you, now we've got everything together in our different options, is to steam, but also to do the dewdrop, squeeze the dewdrop onto the maybe the daffodil and a couple of the flowers, which is quite nice. So I've just set this off to boil. You can see that it's bubbling in here. Just watch out, because when it does bubble, it sometimes spits if it's overfilled. And what we're going to do is just simply hold this quite a distance away. So quite a distance away. I've got ferocious steam, so you don't really want lots of spits of water on there as well. And we're just going to steam it until it starts to go a little bit shiny. Be aware, if you leave it there too long, you're going to end up with paste again. So really don't go too mad with it. So I'm just going to turn that one off. You could do your, of course, the other one would be the same. So if I show you this now, we've got, if I can, we've actually got a real depth of colour coming out because it's setting the colour onto the paste, just that whole melting and setting, and it's just made the colours really pop. This one's unsteamed, especially the leaves. It just makes things go a bit darker. The shine comes off, but you will be left with set your set colours. That way the paste colours are not, or the petal dust colours are not going to, any excess dust won't drop off onto your cake as easily, and that's a real bonus. A little word of warning, that if you do get paste petal dust colours going onto your cake, do not try and remove them. It will make a mess. Maybe put a dropped ivy leaf or something onto it. Try not to clean it off. If you have to, then you can use just a clean brush with clear alcohol, and that will help you get some of it off, but there is no guarantee that you won't get a smudge or an indent of melted paste. So let's come a bit closer. If you can see now, that's nice and clean and all put together. So the last thing, and this is using, you can get online, you can get needle, an injection needle. So this bit you can get from the chemist, but this you have to buy online. Please use responsibly. And what I've done is taken a little bit of piping gel, just mixed it using a spoon or the back of it, or a knife, just to kind of loosen it off. You just need to mix it. You don't need to add anything to it. You can just mix. And it is just sugar. It lasts a long time. We use it for stained glass window effects, anything you want to look like water, but it also does dewdrops. So without the needle on, I've sucked up some of the piping gel into the I don't know what you call that bit, and then put the needle bit back on. Now give me a moment, because I haven't used this for a while. I mean, the best suggestion is to keep this in the fridge. It doesn't really go off, but if someone's going to eat it, I would say, use fresh, but normally with the flowers they don't eat it. So I'm just using a damp cloth to clean off the needle, and then what I'm going to do is just squeeze through, and you'll probably see a little bubble forming on there. The first couple might come out looking a bit like snail trails. So we just need to squeeze until you get a decent blob. And then this is the last thing you do. Okay. You can just then position that dot, just touch the surface where you want it to go. You don't have to have steamed the flower. It doesn't need to be wet. It will hold anyway. It's sticky. And then maybe clean off, go again. So you form the dewdrop on the needle, and then you place just the dewdrop. So the needle is just a vehicle for transporting the dewdrop on to your flower petal. Okay, so I've just got 2 on there. Think about first thing in the morning, yeah, dewdrops, but not loads. So what would pick it up and where would it pick it up? So you might find that you'll get some on the leaves or the primrose, the ivy, you know, but don't go mad because then it looks messy. Now the dewdrops will last, they'll look clean and clear like this for about a week, and then they start to go a bit cloudy. You can wipe them off, but you might find that it'll take some of your petal dust away with it, so just be aware of that. It doesn't stay perfect forever, but it does certainly make it look much more natural. So I'd probably put, I don't know, I might put one in here, and then one on one of my ivy leaves, and maybe one over here, but that would be it. I don't think I would want to put more on. Okay, so that is your finished arrangement with dewdrops and having been steamed. Okay, so here are the finished arrangements. I hope you've enjoyed the class today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye for now.